You touched on, the core temperature and body temperature going up, and I know you've done some stuff on cooling your body during and like Palmer cooling. I know there's some research out there about that, and Dr. Andrew Huberman, who I had on the podcast too, and I know he has talked about that as well. But have you looked into that a little bit more, how to cool the body down to increase performance, during and also recovery as well post?
Yeah, probably one of the best ways to actually do this is to actually become heat acclimated. So you're like, wait a second, going into the sauna is going to make me colder. It does. So the body adapts to heat by slowly reducing core body temperature at baseline. So becoming heat acclimated in the sauna is actually one way to pre-cool the body prior to performance, because after 2 weeks, your baseline core body temperature is dramatically reduced. So now you can soak in more heat before before your core body temperature increases to a critical core temperature. And not only that, but there's been studies that have shown if you are mildly dehydrated and then you go into the sauna and you do that multiple times, that dramatically improves performance later on, because again, you are adapting to the heat, you're becoming cooler at baseline, you're getting all these benefits too. With heat acclimation, this is really cool. You stop losing as many electrolytes in sweat when you become heat acclimated. That's one of the adaptations. Like, let's stop losing so much salt and magnesium in this.
Yeah.
And when you have a more dilute sweat, it evaporates faster. So you literally are a better cooling off machine when you are heat acclimated by going into the sauna for about 2 weeks every single day. And your sweat rate is much higher, and the threshold for inducing sweat is actually much lower. You start sweating much faster, and it evaporates so much quicker. You're like this AC machine now. Like, you like just cool off so much better when you're heat acclimated. So that's one way. We can get into Palmer cooling. Yes, I've done a lot of research on that,
Right.
but I thought that's something that I've never heard of anyone really talk about.
Yeah, so basically, if people start going into a sauna, it increases their propensity to sweat more, but it cools off faster, and they're sweating faster. Because I know me, I do a lot of like TV stuff, and often a lot of these segments are working out, and they'll hook me up to like a heart rate monitor and say it's one of the ones that I'm trying to get to my whatever zone. I'm not going to name a color. You can figure out which brand that is. But they're trying to get me at that certain level, and it drives me crazy. I'm trying to get my heart rate up, and obviously, the more shape you're in, the harder it's going to be to get that to that level. But I'm also not sweating as fast, and that's why part of the reason why I like working out in the summer in the heat. In the Chicago heat as well. One, mainly just to get a tan. I don't really like cardio that much, so I just take my shirt off and get a tan. And two, I start sweating faster, and I like being able to sweat. So you're saying if I was to start going into a sauna for a couple weeks, is there a certain protocol or amount of time, or does it matter if it's a dry sauna or like or a red light sauna? Does it matter?
Yeah, there are protocols, and as you become acclimated, you sort of have to go in for a longer period of time or go in at a higher temperature to maintain the acclimation. Otherwise, you start losing some of the benefits, right? That makes sense as your body's adapting to this. It's like, I'm going to figure out a way to like prevent my core body temperature from continually going up. So there are ways you can monitor and make sure you're hitting a certain heart rate. Typically, the studies aim for about 140 beats per minute. I'm trying to hit that, or maintaining a certain core body temperature. But essentially, going into the sauna, yes, infrared, you don't need as high of heat. In traditional saunas, you do. So if it's an infrared sauna, typically 140 to 160 Fahrenheit for about 20 to 30 minutes. You obviously start slow and slowly work your way up because you don't want to be passing out. And then for traditional saunas, you typically go in at about 170 to 200 for about 20 to 30 minutes. And that's usually the range that you need for those 2 weeks. And again, you'll have to increase it by a couple minutes as you move on to the first week and then the second week. And you maintain those benefits for about 2 weeks after, so you can stop, right? Because you don't want to be constantly blasting yourself with sauna before competition. So you can stop about 2 weeks prior to competition. As long as you are physically active, you will maintain most of those benefits.
Wow, and then that 2 week gap, or I guess sauna deload, if you will. then is that the point where you need to go back? And then after that 2 weeks, are you acclimated to the point, where you were before you took the time off, or is it kind of like going back to day one?
So I've never seen any clinical studies that have tested what you've just asked, but it
Yeah.
would make sense that after the 2 weeks, you've basically gone back to what you've been at if you had a 2 week gap, because you do maintain it, but then after 2 weeks, the adaptations start to drop pretty dramatically. So you would need to go back in to regain those heat acclimation benefits. But you lose a ton of minerals through sweat.
Hmm.
So during those 2 weeks, you are going to be losing things like salt, copper, selenium, iodine, chromium, particularly too. And so athletes can get themselves into trouble if they constantly sweat but aren't heat acclimated, because you got to go almost every single day for about 1 to 2 weeks to really become acclimated. But if you're just going like once every 2 days or 3 days, you're constantly losing a ton of these minerals. And if you don't ever replace them back, it can lead to weak bones, hypothyroidism, weight gain, insulin resistance. People are breaking their legs and stuff, and it's like, what the heck's going on here? Well, are you replacing all the minerals that you're sweating out? Because if you're a high intensity athlete and you're sweating out all these minerals, you can potentially cause some damage to your bones. And so in the mineral fix, I do have a table of what minerals are lost in the exact amounts for every hour of exercise through sweat, because it's a huge issue that I think a lot of athletes don't realize is occurring.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, but I think that's maybe why Conor McGregor broke his tibia. Did you see that?
Well, I did see that. There's potentially a ton of.
Nasty, by the way. If you haven't seen that, dude steps back, and it was probably messed up beforehand, and then that thing just folded over.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. When you have athletes who are doing high impact to their bones, right? You got to really make sure minerals, collagen, vitamins are just completely optimized.
Yeah.
And most of these athletes probably aren't. And it's really important. For a regular person, you don't need to have like Wolverine type bones, right? Your bones don't need to be adamantium.
Yeah, you're
But
not you're not kicking a tree or somebody trying to chop your head off for going 3 years.
exactly. Right. But when you're constantly kicking someone and microfracturing, right? And then you hit bone on bone, you got to have some really strong bones or you're going to break them. And so, yeah, definitely any type of nutrient depletion could potentially lead to weak bones and then those types of injuries.